ज्ञानं चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूप कदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकं। वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरो श्रीयुतापदकमलं श्रीगुरून् वैष्णवांश्च श्रीरूपं साग्रजातं सहगना रघुनाथान्वितं तं सजीवं साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनसहितं कृष्णचैतन्यदेवं श्रीराधाकृष्णपादान् सहगना ललिता श्रीविशाखान्वितांश्च नमः ॐ विष्णुपदाय कृष्णप्रेष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्तस्वामिनिति नामिने नमस्ते सारस्वते देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेषा शून्यवादी पाश्चात्यदेशतारिणे नमो महावदन्याय कृष्णप्रेमप्रदायते कृष्णाय कृष्णचैतन्य नामने गौरत्विषे नमः। हे कृष्णा करुणा सिन्धो दीनबन्धो जगत्पते गोपेश गोपिका कांत राधा कांत नमोस्तुते तप्त कांचन गौरांगी राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिय वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौरभक्तवृंद। हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे। Hare Krishna. Okay, so let us revise one point from yesterday's discussions. Everyone tell one point. Okay, Shamjana, begin.
We see that how the fight was going on between Dhruva Maharaj and the Rakshas, and then Dhruva Maharaj he got angry. So Swambhu Manu has come in order to tell him not to be unnecessarily angry. So yesterday we were discussing in detail, great detail, that what are the bad effects of getting what is necessary anger, what is unnecessary anger, and how to overcome.
Okay, fine. Thank you.
Also, we had discussion about who is ultimately responsible for the jiva's suffering, what is undergoing. So you are mentioning that how Lord is udasin. So we also discussed many examples from Bhagavad Gita also. Prabhupada gives example of judge, the king, like that. So ultimately the jiva is responsible. So we discuss about the immediate cause and the remote cause. That way. Okay. So Lord is the remote cause, but ultimately is the root. The main responsibility lies of the jiva's own.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
हरे कृष्ण। तो इस हमारे सुख और दुख का कारण कौन है, तो इसका उसके लिए जो उदाहरण दिया ये जो श्लोक में बताया है कि जैसे हवा चलती है तो उसके साथ छोटे छोटे कंकड़ भी उड़ते हैं, तो वैसा है कि भगवान किसी को ये नहीं करते कि डिस्क्रिमिनेशन नहीं करते कि ये है, तो भगवान तो अपना सबको संभव देखते हैं, लेकिन हमारे कर्म के कारण ही हमें सुख दुख होता है।
Okay, thank you.
Yesterday we discussed about unnecessary anger that arises out of frustration of selfish desires, whereas necessary anger, reasonable anger arises out of deep compassion for rectifying the subordinate.
Okay, good. Thank you.
We had also talked about Durvibhavya, inconceivable potency of the Lord, and like the control of the Lord, full control and detachment. Both can be only understood when there is we accept the inconceivable potency of the Lord.
Yes, thank you. Is there anyone online?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Yes, Prabhu.
Yeah. Yesterday we discussed on Lord is Purna. So Om Purnamada Purnamida Purnata Purna Mudachete. That Gopal Dada's example we discuss.
Right. Yes, we discussed. Thank you. Anybody else is there?
Yeah, Hare Krishna Prabhuji. So yesterday also you told about how Dhruva Maharaj was determined. Similarly, Lord also is determined to check his determination. And initially Narad Muni came inspired by Lord to meet Dhruva. Similarly, later on, the sages also come by the inspiration of Lord only to assure him of the protection of the Lord. And we discussed Ananya Bhak means three parts: nobody else but Lord's shelter only, no other desire, like that.
Right. So the sages, they came on the inspiration of the Lord to help Dhruva Maharaj in the time of difficulty. Okay, good. Anybody else online? Okay, good. So we'll continue now. We're finished till text 20. And the text 20 said that how everyone enjoys or suffers the result of his own karma or fruitive activity. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatam Vyasam Tato Jayam Mudirayet. Okay, text 21. Let's recite. Ayusho pachayam jantos tataivo pachayam vibhu ubhabhyam rahitasvasto dustasya vidadatyasau. The Supreme Personality of Godhead Vishnu is all powerful and he awards the results of one's fruitive activities. Thus, although one living entity's duration of life is very small, whereas that of another is very great, he is always in his transcendental position, and there is no question of lessening or increasing his duration of life. So, although the living entities, different living entities, somebody's duration of life is very small, somebody's is very long, but as far as the Supreme Lord is concerned, there's no question of increasing or decreasing his duration of life. He's always eternal. Nothing has any effect on him. So, as Prabhupada writes, the very short duration of life of the mosquito and the very long lifetime of Lord Brahma are both awarded by the Supreme Personality of Godhead according to the results of their karma. But karmani nirdahati, the Lord diminishes or vanquishes the reactions of devotees. Yes. And as far as the Lord is concerned, he is not affected by all this. So in this world, everyone is affected by karma. So then the next question arises, so is karma the only cause for the living entities' suffering and happiness? So in the next verse, Swayambhu Manu describes, Kechit karma vadantyenam swabhavam apare nripa eke kalam pare devam pumsa kamam utapare. The differentiation among varieties of life and their suffering and enjoyment is explained by some to be the result of karma, others say it is due to nature, others due to time, others due to fate, and still others say that is due to desire. Okay, so different theories according to different philosophies and different philosophers. So he's just talking about those different philosophies. So which of these philosophies is correct? That's what he answers in the next verse. Okay, read the translation. Next verse.
The absolute truth transcendence is never subject to understanding of imperfect sensory endeavor, nor is he subject to direct experience. He is a master of varieties of energies, like the full matter energy, and no one can understand his plans or actions. Therefore, it should be concluded that although he is the original cause of all causes, no one can know him by mental speculation.
Yes, so all these different theories as to why the living entity suffers, enjoys, all of them are mental speculations. But ultimately, everything is happening by the plan of the Lord, and that plan of the Lord cannot be understood by anyone. As Bhishma Dev also says in the 9th chapter of the first canto, who can understand the plan of the Lord? No one can understand. So what to speak of mental speculators and all other people, they cannot understand the plan of the Lord. So in the purport Prabhupada writes, the question may be raised, since there are so many varieties of philosophers theorizing in different ways, which of them is correct? This is very similar to the conversation between the bull and Parikshit Maharaj. There also we find the bull giving so many different theories. This may be the cause, that may be the cause. But then ultimately the cause is the supreme law. The answer is that the absolute truth, transcendence, is never subject to direct experience or mental speculation. And then Prabhupada gives the example of Dr. Frog. The cause of all causes, the absolute truth, can be known from the absolute truth himself and not by our ascending process to reach him. And then again, he gives another example. We cannot see the sun at night with torchlight. So no one can say that he has discovered a torchlight so powerful that if one goes on a roof and focuses the torchlight on the night sky, the sun will be seen. So therefore, further down, he says, transcendence is not the subject matter of direct experience. The absolute truth may be known in the same way as the sun covered by a cloud or covered by night. For when the sun rises in the morning in its own way, then everyone can see the sun, everyone can see the world, and everyone can see himself. This understanding of self-realization is called Atma Tattva. So ultimately, the Supreme Lord reveals himself. We cannot understand the Supreme Lord by mental speculation or direct experience. So further down, therefore, he says, unless one comes to this point of understanding Atma Tattva, one remains in the darkness in which he was born. Under the circumstances, no one can understand the plan of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But we also make so many plans, isn't it? As devotees, we all make plans. Right. So we can make plans, but ultimately we have to know that Krishna's plan prevails. That is what is supreme. So we can make so many different plans, but unless those plans are sanctioned, nothing is going to happen.
Prabhupada was told to go to West and preach. So on that order, then he makes further plans. So plan is made, but it's not like completely one's own thought process, and then whether Lord sanctions or not, that's another thing. But then
Correct. Very good point. So yes, the plans are made according to the desire of the spiritual master, Vaishnavas. According to that, the plans are made. But ultimately, one understands that yes, one has to depend on the Supreme Lord for the fulfillment of any plan. So, in that connection, you may have heard that pastime. This comes in the Lilamrita also. When in 1969, there was that famous but not very pleasant incident when some of the disciples started claiming that Srila Prabhupada is God. Correct? Everyone knows that pastime. And then at the same time, because there was some contamination of Mayavad, so at the same time, because Mayavad means that, okay, Guru is God, but we are also God. So everyone is one. So therefore, there were many offenses that were happening towards Srila Prabhupada. They didn't allow him to sit on the Rath cart. The founder Acharya was not there on the books. Books were not properly treated. So many offenses were happening. Srila Prabhupada was quite disgusted with the whole thing. So then, Srila Prabhupada made a plan. What was the plan? So that started before that. The sannyasis were expelled, told to start. Yes, but Rancho Prabhu said something right. What?
He left for Japan.
He left. He was planning to go to Japan. So then this was told by Surbi Prabhu. You know Surbi Prabhu? He's the architect. He was the architect of Vrindavan, Juhu. So when he came to the Los Angeles Prabhupada Festival in 2015, so that time he told this pastime. So he was consulting Tamal Krishna Maharaj, and he said, now what is to be done now? I can't stay in the US. So Tamal Krishna Maharaj suggested, maybe you should go to Europe. So Srila Prabhupada said, no, Europe is not too far from America. Not so good. So then he suggested Japan. Prabhupada was not so interested in Japan also. But before this incident took place, actually Srila Prabhupada, he went in front of the deities of Rukmini Dwarkadish at Los Angeles. Because at that time, Srila Prabhupada's plan was, because it was the instruction of a spiritual master to preach in the Western world. So therefore, Srila Prabhupada's plan was actually to preach only in the West, make Los Angeles the international headquarters. That was his plan. And at that time itself, Srila Prabhupada would call different devotees from different centers to come to Los Angeles. So much of training would take place in Los Angeles. So he went before the deities with tears in his eyes. He was praying, my dear Lord, I came here on the instruction of my spiritual master to preach Krishna consciousness in the Western world. But what is happening? What am I supposed to do in this situation? So apparently, Srila Prabhupada at that point of time could not understand what is the plan of the Lord. And so then after that, this incident took place. He was consulting with Tamal Krishna Maharaj. Where to go? And then finally, Tamal Krishna Maharaj, no, I think so he didn't suggest. Finally, Srila Prabhupada himself, he took the decision to come to India. And that is how Srila Prabhupada came to India. And that is why we are sitting here. Otherwise, as Surbi Prabhu says, Srila Prabhupada didn't have any big plans to actually preach in India at that point of time. So this particular incident was also orchestrated by the Supreme Lord so that Srila Prabhupada comes to India and preaching in India begins. And then, of course, he describes how that's how Srila Prabhupada came to Mumbai. And then Surbi Prabhu, he's basically from, if I'm not mistaken, Amsterdam. And then he was an architect by profession. He wanted to study Indian temples, architecture of Indian temples, and that's how he landed in Mumbai. And then he was inquiring if there are any Krishna temples in Mumbai. And he says at that point of time, there was not one Krishna temple in the whole of Mumbai. Many others were there, Ganpati, Durga, and so on, but not one Krishna temple. And now see how many Krishna temples. This is what Srila Prabhupada did. So at that time, devotees were staying in this apartment. Huh? Akash Ganga. Yes. They were staying in that apartment. So somebody told him there's one Krishna temple there. So that's how he came there. The first person he met was Shyam Sundar Prabhu. He was a hippie at that time with long hair. Shyam Sundar Prabhu said, our spiritual master Srila Prabhupada is here. Would you like to meet him? Okay. Shyam Sundar Prabhu gave him some 1 rupee or something to get his hair shaved. And then the next day, he arranged a meeting with Srila Prabhupada. And Shyam Sundar Prabhu introduced him. This is Mr. So-and-so. He's an architect. And as soon as Srila Prabhupada heard that he was an architect, Prabhupada on the spot removed the drawings of the Juhu temple, made Surbhi Prabhu sit beside him and explained all the drawings. He has not even started chanting 1 round by that time. Anyway, that's how the whole Indian preaching began. So this is how Krishna's plans are so inconceivable. That's what Bhishma Dev says. Even the greatest of philosophers cannot understand the plan of the Lord. And in the purport, Srila Prabhupada writes very beautifully that actually, therefore, when some things happen which appears as if it is against our plan, having faith that Krishna has a plan, one must accept those incidents ungrudgingly. Without grudge, one must accept. Krishna definitely has a plan. I don't understand. Therefore, Durvibhavya. Krishna's plans, Krishna's activities, everything is inconceivable. If I could understand everything, what Krishna is thinking and what is Krishna's plan, then what is the difference between me and Krishna? So this has to be our faith. When we don't understand why certain events and incidents are taking place in one's life, then one has that faith that Krishna is Suridam Sarva Bhutanam. He is the best well-wishing friend of every living entity. And therefore, one has faith that yes, definitely Krishna has a plan for me, though I cannot understand. Of course, one should definitely consult senior devotees, Vaishnavas, and try to figure out. But in any case, one has faith that whatever is Krishna's plan, that is perfect. So therefore, sometimes very difficult to understand. At that point of time, apparently, when Srila Prabhupada couldn't understand what is Krishna's plan. But Krishna definitely had a plan. And of course, then the rest is history as to how Indian preaching expanded after that. So that's what Srila Prabhupada is writing over here. And that is what is being said over here, that one cannot understand the Lord with one's mental speculation, with direct experience, one cannot understand. So it's all possible only when the Lord reveals himself. So that's what he says. Under the circumstances, no one can understand the plan of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And therefore, further down, Prabhupada says, no material scientist can foretell what is going to happen in the future. So there could be many astrologers, but then ultimately Krishna is in control. And so if Krishna wants, he can change so many things. The Bhakti Yoga process, however, is completely different from so-called scientific advancement of knowledge. A devotee completely surrenders unto the Supreme, who reveals himself by his causeless mercy. In conclusion, the cause of all causes, the absolute truth, the Supreme Brahman, cannot be understood by philosophical speculation, but he reveals himself to his devotee because the devotee fully surrenders unto his lotus feet. Okay, so one may not understand, but Krishna orchestrates everything so that everything perfectly happens in the life of a devotee. And of course, in the life of Srila Prabhupada, We see so many such incidents that took place that were perfectly orchestrated according to the plan of the Lord. Okay, fine. Text 24, please read, translation.
The Supreme Personality of God.
24.
Sorry. My dear son, those yakshas who are descendants of Kuvera are not actually the killers of your brother. The birth and death of every living entity are caused by the Supreme, who is certainly the cause of all causes.
Next.
The Supreme Personality of Godhead creates this material world, maintains it, and annihilates it in due course of time. But because he is transcendental to such activities, he is never affected by ego in such action or by the modes of material nature.
Okay, so the entire theme that we are discussing, that is being discussed by Swayambhu Manu, is that don't hold the Lord responsible for whatever is happening. The Lord is not affected by the modes of material nature. He's not affected by ego. It is not that he has some bias towards someone, therefore he's getting someone killed or something like that. No, he's not affected by all this. He has no work to do. He is not bound by work. And so therefore, he is not responsible for whatever is happening. And everything is ultimately happening according to the karma of the living entities. So therefore, Lord is not responsible. The yakshas are also not responsible for the killing of Uttama. But everything is happening according to that particular living entity's karma. So therefore, in the purport, Prabhupada differentiates between the conditioned soul and the Supreme Lord. The super soul, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, has no material body, and because he has no material body, he is not affected by any work he executes. Krishna's body is never material, it is transcendental. Krishna has no false ego. His body is always eternal. Text 26.
The Supreme Personality of Godhead is the super soul of all living entities. He is the controller and maintainer of everyone. Through the agency of his external energy, he creates, maintains, and annihilates everyone.
So he's sort of summarizing the whole thing. So he's saying that the Supreme Lord, he is super soul, he is the controller, he does creation, maintenance, annihilation. He does everything, but it is all happening through his agencies. It is all happening through his energies, the external energy, and he himself is not responsible for anything. So then Dhruv Maharaj may say, okay, all what you have said is correct, but then, yes, the Lord is not responsible. The yakshas are also not responsible. But what to do? I have a false ego. The Lord doesn't have ego, but I have a false ego. And because of my false ego, I am forced to think that, no, these yakshas are responsible for killing. Then what to do? So therefore, in the next few verses, Swayambhu Manu says that in order to get free from this false ego and all these misconceptions, one must simply surrender to the Lord. And by surrendering to the Lord, one can become free from this false ego. Therefore, in the next verse, he says, Tameva mrutyam amritam tata devam sarvat manopehi jagat parayanam yasmai balim vishva srijo haranti gavo yatha vaina sidama yantritaha.
My dear boy Dhruv, please surrender unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is the ultimate goal of the progress of the world. Everyone, including the demigods headed by Lord Brahma, is working under his control, just as a bull, prompted by a rope in its nose, is controlled by its owner.
Yes, so therefore, Swayambhu Manu is saying, the solution is simply surrender unto the Supreme Lord, because he is in full control. So even Vishwasrija, all the demigods like Brahma, even they are controlled by the Supreme Lord, just like the Gava Yathavai Nasi Dhamma Yantritaha, just like the bulls are controlled by the rope passing through the nostril. So similarly, the Supreme Lord is controlling everyone. Therefore, ultimately, everyone has to surrender to the Supreme Lord. Prabhupada writes, the material disease is to declare independence from the Supreme Controller. Factually, our material existence begins when we forget the Supreme Controller and wish to lord it over material nature. Everyone in the material world is trying his best to become the Supreme Controller, individually, nationally, socially, and in many other ways. Dhruva Maharaj was advised to stop fighting by his grandfather, who was concerned that Dhruva was adhering to a personal ambition to fight, to annihilate the whole race of the Yakshas. In this verse, therefore, Swayambhu Manu seeks to eradicate the last tinge of false ambition in Dhruva by explaining the position of the Supreme Controller. So that's what he's saying. The words Mrityum, Amritam, death and immortality are significant. Because Lord says, Mrityu Sarva Harasyaham. I am ultimate death who takes away everything from the demons. So in this way, the Lord is the Supreme Controller. The disease is we also think that we also can become some controllers. We are independent. But what is our independence? What is our control? So it is so insignificant, hardly any control. So for the materialistic person, or for anyone for that matter, there's hardly any independence. So somebody may say, no, we are independent, isn't it? I can choose what to do. I can choose which movie to go. I can choose what activity to do. I can choose whether to come for this class or no. I can choose what eatables to eat. So many things I can choose, correct? So we have independence, isn't it? How it is being said here that there is practically no, everyone in the material world is trying his best to become the Supreme Controller. But he says that's a disease. So many times Prabhupada keeps writing again and again, there is no independence. But still, it appears there is some independence, correct? How do we explain? हाँ बोलो माइक ले लो.
We are acting independently, but actually we are acting in influence of the three modes.
Okay, so that is correct. Then somebody may say, okay, if you say that the jiva is being completely controlled by the modes, then where is the role of free will?
Yes. Actually, under the influence of the modes, we are misusing the free will, basically.
Okay.
So that's why when one practices devotional service and as soon as gets transcending the modes, then he can actually, to that extent, he is rightly using the free will also.
Okay, that's correct. Okay, yes, Vadrashpur, please add something to this.
Hare Krishna. We are having the independence for performing the action, but we are not having the independence for the consequences of the action.
Okay, so
Consequences are fixed, but the action can be chosen by the little independence which is there.
okay, action can be chosen, but the consequences are fixed.
Yes.
So then that means if you say action is, we can choose the action. So that means we have independence, correct?
Yes.
Then why he's giving the example that just like the bull is tied by the nose and then he's pulled, when he's pulled, he has to move in that particular direction. That means there's no independence.
No, he can choose not to move, but then his nose will bleed. It's not that he has to move. He can choose not to move. But if he doesn't move, then the consequence is not in his hand, and the nose will bleeding.
Okay, good
So
point.
he has to move only.
Yes, good point. Good explanation. Somebody would like to add something more? Yes, Alakshan.
Hare Krishna. Just like when we tie a cow or bull, that bull has independence till the length of his rope only, not outside the rope. So that bull has that independence only till that rope moves. Similarly, we have little independence, but we are not fully independent. We are being a minute part and parcel of the Lord. So if there is no independence, then there is no question of part and parcel of the Lord.
Okay.
So we have little independence, but that does not mean that we are fully independent like the Supreme Lord.
Correct. Okay, fine. Thank you. Somebody else would like to add something to the, yes, Antadeep?
Three modes govern us because there are past sanskaras which come out. And we have the free will, means by using our by doing devotional service, by chanting, we are actually helping our free will to become free in one sense, to act against the dictations of the modes, against the dictation to live by Guru and Shastra. And usually if we don't connect to that principle of living by Guru and Shastra, then we will be carried forward by the modes only. So the past sanskaras dictate us to do something and we do that.
Correct.
But when we choose to take another stand based on the determination, that strength which comes from the higher powers, so then we are able to act. So in that also we are dependent, but that time we have got Krishna's grace to act freed from the modes by the mercy of the Lord.
Good, very good point. Would you like to give some example to illustrate what you just said? Okay, fine. Maybe if you, yes, Raghu.
In a similar line only, Guruji, that free will one can exercise when he gets the grace of a devotee. Actually, then it starts happening. So before that, almost it's like he's completely just governed by the mode, because before he has misused the freedom, and that's why now he's bound by the modes. So it just goes on with the modes only. But by the intervention of a devotee, then he gives him a chance to now, help him to now use his free will, which is the right of that soul. And that's how the whole process of using the free will starts.
Correct.
And then he gets more and more empowered to use that free will, and eventually he can become fully free.
Good, very good. Example. You have some example? Okay.
Srila Prabhupada disciples, many of them are very hippies. We have seen the example of Sam Sundar Prabhu when he was making the deities of Baldev, that ash. So how could they give up that? Because he got that potential. I mean, Prabhupada one time indicated, and then he left. So when the spiritual master intervenes, then person can get the strength to give up that and to transcend the movements, to transcend that. So basically it's transcending the modes also.
Correct.
Because when one is giving up the conditioning, actually the strength is coming from there.
Okay, good, very good point. So Prabhu,
because we are part and parcel of Krishna. Krishna is supreme independent, so we also have got minute independence. And this independence is only in regards to desire. The only thing which the jiva can do is desire.
correct.
But foolishly, the jiva thinks that, like Krishna is saying, Prakriti kriyamanani guda karmani sarvasha ahankara vimodatma kartamiti manata. Foolishly, the moment the jiva desires, or the desire itself is using a free will in a certain way, immediately the modes start acting on the jiva and make him forced, the jiva is forced to act in a certain way to fulfill his desires.
Right.
So actually it is no independence, because the only thing is the jiva is doing is desiring to go to class or not to class, like you said, no? That so it's just desire, it's nothing more than that. Actually modes are totally in function and jivatma is not at all doing anything.
Okay, at least is desiring. Correct.
Yeah, the independence is only about desiring.
Correct.
So if this small independence is utilized to serve Krishna, then jivatma will get actual true independence.
So so still you are accepting that there is some independence, correct?
Yes, there is independence, because we are part and parcel of Krishna. We have got minute independence because Krishna is supreme independent.
But in some lectures, Prabhupada says, actually the independence is so minute that actually there's no independence. So as devotees have explained, just like the example is given, if there's a chronic drunkard and you put a wine bottle in front of him, does he have free will or no? To drink or not to drink? Does he have free will? Yeah. But what will he do? There's no doubt about it. Why? Totally controlled by the lower modes, tamogun. Because of the total control of Tamagun, even though he has a free will, but still he can hardly use the free will at that point of time. That is how he's bound by the modes. That's how the jiva is so much bound by the modes that even the desire is also controlled by the modes. You're saying that he has the free will to desire, but even the desire is being controlled by the modes. That is why Prabhupada gives the example in 714 purport that it is as if the jiva is completely tied up by ropes. Hands and legs are tied up tightly by ropes. What freedom he has? There's no freedom. So even the desire is controlled by modes. Though we say that yes, he can desire, but even desire is controlled by modes. So where is independence? Therefore, practically there is no independence for the jiva in the material worlds. And Srila Prabhupada writes a beautiful statement in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 13, verse 22 purport. It's an amazing statement. It's like a Mahavakya. Of course, that verse itself is called as the Mahavakya for the last 6 chapters of the Bhagavad Gita. And this statement of Srila Prabhupada is the Mahavakya for the solution to come out of the influence of the modes. Srila Prabhupada writes, to the degree one submits to the hearing process, to that degree one can gradually and proportionately come out of the influence of the modes to experience transcendental bliss. Maybe it's a little paraphrase. If somebody can quickly open and read the sentence as it is. (1322) purport, second paragraph.
Shall I read, Prabhuji?
Okay, Sona Gaur, probably read. Yes. So there is that specific statement. You can read it. It comes a little further down in that purport. To the degree one submits to the hearing process.
Can I?
Please go ahead.
The living entity, if he submits to this hearing process, will lose his long cherished desire to dominate material nature, and gradually and proportionately, as he reduces his long desire to dominate, he comes to enjoy spiritual happiness.
Yes. Amazing statements. So when the living entity, the only way he can get out of this entanglement of the modes, which is so tightly binding the living entity that he cannot even desire. He has free will to desire, but even desire is also controlled by modes. That is how the living entity is bound. So the only solution is, Prabhupada is not saying only hearing. What is he saying? Submits to the hearing process. Today morning Bhagavatam class also Shankar Pandit was using that phrase which Prabhupada does use quite often, submissive oral reception. So one can hear. So many people come to a class and hear. But how many people submit to the hearing process? That makes the whole difference. So many people come to a Bhagavad Saptah. They hear for 7 days. So clap their hands and have some nice spiritual entertainments. And then after 7 days, what happens? As it is, nothing happens. Why? Of course, what is the quality of speaker? That is another thing. But the point is that submits to the hearing process. That means what one is hearing. So we are discussing so many of these Bhagavatam purports which Srila Prabhupada has taken so much trouble to give us. So how much we are really contemplating and thinking of how to apply them in our life. That is, submits to the hearing process. So when one submits to the hearing process, then what is the result? one loses his long cherished desire to dominate the material world. How long? Since time immemorial. He is having this long cherished desire to, as Prabhupada is writing here, his long cherished desire to become the controller, to become the supreme controller. That is there since time immemorial. But if one wants to lose that desire, one has to submit to the hearing process. Then he loses that desire to dominate, and to the degree, and because this desire is there since time immemorial, it is also going to take some time. Therefore, Prabhupada is saying gradually and proportionately. What is the proportion? To the degree one submits, to that degree, one will lose the tendency to dominate. That is the proportion. There's proportion between these two. Direct proportion. More one submits, more one loses the desire to dominate. And more one loses the desire to dominate, then what is the result of that? Yes, then one can experience the spiritual bliss. Just one statement, but it is like the solution to the whole problem. Even devotees sometimes ask, why are we not, we are practicing since quite a few years, why are we not feeling happiness? Prabhupada said, chant and be happy. Why we are not feeling happiness? In one sentence, Srila Prabhupada has given the problem and the solution. So precise. The problem is the tendency to be the controller, no submission. I want to do what I want. Who is going to control me? That is the disease. Solution is submit to the hearing process. And to the degree that submission is there, then to that degree, one will lose the desire to dominate. And then when the desire to dominate goes away, then one can actually experience the spiritual bliss. So that's what exactly is being told over here by Swayambhu Manu also. Swayambhu Manu is also telling the same thing. You want to be the dominator? You want to kill all the yakshas thinking you are the controller? No. This is not the way. You give up this tendency to dominate and surrender. If one surrenders, then yes. Then that's what Prabhupada is writing. Swayambhu Manu seeks to eradicate the last tinge. He's already on the liberated platform, having darshan of the Supreme Lord, but still the power of the modes is so strong in the material world, still there is some tinge of controlling mentality. And Swayambhu Manu wants to eradicate that last tinge of false ambition and dhruva by explaining the position of the supreme controller who is controlling life and death and everything else. Further down, Prabhupada says, devotees who render continuous service to the Lord have already attained immortality. For whatever they are doing in this life, they will continue to do in the next. They will simply change their material bodies for spiritual bodies. Unlike the demons, they no longer have to change material bodies. The Lord, therefore, is simultaneously death and immortality. He is death for demons and immortality for devotees. He is the ultimate goal of everyone because he is the cause of all causes. Text 28. Please read the translation.
Prabhuji.
We'll just, a few more verses are remaining. So we'll just finish it, and if there are some questions, we can.
My dear Dhruva, at the age of only 5 years, you are very grievously afflicted by the words of your mother's co-wife. And you very boldly gave up the protection of your mother and went to the forest to engage in yogic process for realization of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. As a result of this, you already achieved topmost position in all the three worlds.
So, as Prabhupada writes in the last sentence, because Dhruva Maharaj had already surrendered to the Supreme Godhead, he was especially requested not to do anything unbefitting a surrendered soul. He had already surrendered. So, Swayambhu Manu is sort of reminding him, you are surrendered, now act according to a surrendered soul and don't act otherwise. 29.
Therefore, my dear Dhruva, please turn your attention to Supreme Person, who is the infallible Brahman. Face the Supreme Personality of Godhead in her original position, and thus, by self-realization, you will find this material differentiation to be merely flickering.
Okay, so the material differentiation is differentiation of friends and enemies. We already had quite a long discussion on that. The differentiation between friends and enemies, which is on the bodily platform. So therefore he's saying, surrender to the Lord, come to the proper realization. And therefore Prabhupada writes, a devotee who is already liberated does not see differentiation in terms of the outward body. He sees all living entities as spirit souls, eternal servants of the Lord. Indirectly, Manu pointed out to Dhruva Maharaj that out of material affection, Dhruva thought of his brother as his kin and the yakshas as his enemies. Such observation of differentiation subsides as soon as one is situated in his original position as an eternal servant of the Lord. Text 30.
Regaining your natural positions and rendering service unto the Supreme Lord, who is the all-powerful reservoir of all pleasures and who lives in all living entities as the super soul. You will very soon forget the illusory understanding of I and mine.
Okay, so in this way, by surrendering to the Lord, one will give up this material conceptions of aham mameti. As Prabhupada writes, Dhruva Maharaj was already a liberated person because at the age of 5 years, he had seen the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But even though liberated, he was for the time being afflicted by the illusion of Maya. Even though on the liberated platform, he was still affected by Maya. That is the power of Maya in the material worlds. That even somebody on a liberated platform, like Dhruva Maharaj, Bharat Maharaj, they were all on liberated platform. But the power of Maya is so great in the material world that sometimes even they can be affected by the material energy. What to speak of us? So, but even though liberated, he was for the time being afflicted by the illusion of Maya, thinking himself the brother of Uttama in the bodily concept of life. The whole material world is working on the basis of I and mine. This is the root of attraction to the material worlds. And what is the solution? Last sentence. Simply by devotional service unto the Lord, his illusion could be eradicated without difficulty. 31.
My dear king, just consider what I have said to you, which will act as medicinal treatment upon disease. Control your anger, for anger is the foremost enemy on the path of spiritual realization. I wish all good fortune for you. Please follow my instructions.
Okay, this is a very interesting purport. You can read. Please go.
Dhruva Maharaj was a liberated soul, and actually he was not angry with anyone. But because he was the ruler, it was his duty to become angry for some time in order to keep law and order in the state. His brother Uttama was without fault, yet he was killed by one of the Yakshas. It was the duty of Dhruva Maharaj to kill the offender, life for life, because Dhruva was the king. When the challenge came, Dhruva Maharaj fought vehemently and punished the Yakshas sufficiently. But anger is such that if one increases it, it increases unlimitedly. In order that Dhruva Maharaj's kingly anger not exceed the limit, Manu was kind enough to check his grandson Dhruva Maharaj, who could understand the purpose of his grandfather. And he immediately stopped the fighting. The words Shutena Bhuya Sa, by constantly hearing, are very important in this verse. By constantly hearing about devotional service, one can check the force of anger, which is detrimental to the process of devotional service. Srila Parishit Maharaj said that the constant hearing of the pastimes of the Lord is the panacea for all the material diseases. Everyone, therefore, should hear about the Supreme Personality of Godhead constantly. By hearing, one can always remain in equilibrium, and thus his progress in spiritual life will not be hampered. Dhruva Maharaj's becoming angry with the miscreants was quite appropriate. There is a short story in this connection about a snake who became a devotee upon instruction by Narada, who instructed him not to bite anymore. Since ordinarily a snake's business is to fatally bite other living entities, as a devotee, he was forbidden to do so. Unfortunately, people took advantage of this non-violence on the part of the snake, especially the children, who began to throw stones at him. He did not bite anyone, however, because it was the instruction of his spiritual master. After a while, when the snake met his spiritual master Narada, he complained, I have given up the bad habit of biting innocent living entities, but they are mistreating me by throwing stones at me. Upon hearing this, Narad Muni instructed him, don't bite, but do not forget to expand your hood as if you are going to bite. Then they will go away. Similarly, a devotee is always non-violent. He is qualified with all good characteristics. But in the common world, when there is mischief made by others, he should not forget to be angry, at least for the time being, in order to drive away the miscreants.
Okay, so very interesting purports. Hmm. So what's the lesson? We had so much discussion on anger yesterday. What's that? Show the anger, but don't be angry. And how to do that?
Should have a Swayambhu Manu with us. there should be a Swayambhu Manu for everybody.
Who's that?
Everybody has to choose that Swayambhu Manu.
So practical application of this purports. Please share your realizations. Raghu Kripa Prabhu.
One solution which is being told here is the constantly hearing about devotional service. So one thing for practical application is that in general, our life should be so much surcharged with Shavanam and Kirtanam program. And then there'll be some situations like in organization and all that where one may have to show the necessary anger, which may be for the service. So that time it would be, one will have more strength to do it in appropriate way.
Okay, good point. Thank you. Somebody else would like to share some. I think Kirti Krishna wants to say something.
Hare Krishna. This is a combination of yesterday's of discussion, necessary anger and unnecessary anger. Yes, in this, just Srila Prabhupada is giving an example. Narada Muni is instructed the snake. Yes, that is the nature of this material world. When we get it's just simple, then we will use the undue advantage. So, but at the same time, again, Narada Muni instructed that do the needful, but not act upon. As Levatipati was mentioning that show the anger, but not express it in that way. Yesterday we were discussing about necessary and unnecessary, how to combine this is that. When we are being in this institution as in management or anything, and when we have shown that, even for the matter of, as Narada Muni instructing, just to show it so that they will go away. If in that situation, if that is not coming up, then we show that anger, but actually if it is a necessary, then the devotee who showed that, he will become normal. He will not carry forward the grudgings. He can bend down also, just like in Prithu Maharaj's case. Yesterday we discussed the same thing. Indra troubled him like anything. He showed anger as equal as Indra, but when Brahma had come there, Vishnu had come there, yes, because he wanted to set an example. He was taking the other sampradayas. So to set an example as a king, same Dhruva Maharaj is doing the same thing, but they are ready to bend down. They are ready to submit. So in that situation, yes, it's necessary to show the anger, but provided we are submissive to the oral reception and hearing process.
Okay, good, very good. Maybe one more somebody. Yes, Shri Kumar.
Many times the outsiders may try to cheat us. It can be market or like Prabhupada says that auto driver example, Those places we can confront for the need of saving the Lakshmi like that. So this purport, whatever the story Narada Muni has told, So those kind of places we can exhibit that anger. And yet after that we have to be detached and we have to go on with our services.
Correct. So, yes, that's very true. Prabhupada is writing here, but anger is such that if one increases it, it increases unlimitedly. So yes, so for practical purposes, practical reasons, we may have to show our anger. But by showing anger also, we are inviting the Rajogun and Tamogun. And so there is always a risk of getting carried away by that anger, as in the case of Dhruva Maharaj. So we may show anger for service, but there's a risk there. What is the risk? One could get carried away by the anger. Therefore, to not get carried away by the anger and to remain in equilibrium, therefore, then Srila Prabhupada is focusing on the hearing process. So when there is the constant hearing process, there is purification, then even though one may show anger for service, but then one will also be able to calm down and not be excessively carried away by anger because of the proper purification, proper intellectual understanding, philosophical understanding. When everything is properly there by the hearing process, then that's how one can balance these two. One can show anger for the appropriate purpose, necessary anger, but at the same time, one may not get carried away by the anger when one has the proper attitudes, the proper purification. That's why Prabhupada says, by constantly hearing about devotional service, one can check the force of anger, which is detrimental to the process of devotional service. Okay, so nice purport. Okay, please read 32. Okay, the remaining translations, somebody can just go through the remaining translations. Okay, here, Shri Kumar Krishna Prabhu is reading. Please read.
A person who desires liberation from this material world should not fall under the control of anger, because when bewildered by the anger, one becomes a source of dread for all others.
So a nice point Prabhupada is writing. A devotee or saintly person should not be dreadful to others. Dreadful means person looks dangerous, nor should anyone be a source of dread to him. Okay, so that's what he's saying. Okay, go ahead.
My dear Dhruva, you thought that the Yaksha killed your brother, and therefore you have killed great numbers of them. But by this action, you have agitated the mind of Lord Shiva's brother Kuvera, who is a treasurer of the demigods. Please note that your actions have been very disrespectful to Kuvera and Lord Shiva.
Go ahead.
For this reason, my son, you should immediately pacify Kuvera with gentle words and prayers, and thus his wrath may not affect our family. Thus, Swayambhuva Manu, after giving instruction to Dhruva Maharaj, his grandson, received respectful obeisances from him. Then Lord Manu and the great sages went back to their respectful homes.
Thus in the Bhaktivedanta purports of the 4th canto, 11th chapter Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled Swayambhuva Manu advises Dhruva Maharaj to stop fighting. In the purport of text 34, some important points. In our common dealings, we should maintain friendship with everyone, and certainly with such exalted demigods as Kuvera. Our behavior should be such that no one should become angry and thereby commit a wrong to individuals, families, or society. So here, Swayambhu Manu was concerned that Lord Shiva, Kuvera, they will become upset by Dhruva Maharaj's dealings, and that will affect the whole family of Swayambhu Manu. So he was concerned about that. And so therefore, Srila Prabhupada is writing that, so our dealing should be such, so exemplary, that no one else is agitated by one's behavior that may affect individuals, family, or society. So these are some very important points which we can try to apply within our own lives. Okay, so we'll just take a 7 minutes break and then we will take some questions and then we'll go ahead with the next chapter. Hare Krishna, please. So just like, so we hear so many things about how to rise above the lower modes, how to increase the mode of goodness. Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita has described foods in the mode of goodness, determination in the mode of, foods in the three modes, determination in three modes, work in the three modes. So many things Krishna has described throughout the Gita. So if one may read them, hear them, speak about them, give lectures to others, but if one oneself doesn't make an attempt to follow, then how will any transformation take place in one's own life? So the submission to the hearing process means that one has to try and follow. That is the basic meaning of submission, isn't it? Submission means somebody is giving instructions. Srila Prabhupada is giving instructions. Spiritual masters are giving instructions. So they're giving instructions. So if I submit to them, then that's how one can rise above the modes. To give a simple example, so by the influence of Tamogun, we want to sleep in the morning. We may not want to get up for Mangalarti. That is the influence of Tamogun. But if I remember that my spiritual authorities have instructed me, my spiritual master is instructed, Srila Prabhupada is instructed that I have to rise early in the morning, attend Mangalarti. So if I remember that instruction and I submit to that instruction, then in spite of the influence of Tamogun, I make an effort to get up and attend the Mangalarti. Then that's how I slowly come out of the influence of Tamogun. So that's an example, but it applies to everything. So that's how when one takes those instructions seriously and one tries to apply, then gradually one can come out of the influence of the modes, and that's how one can come to the transcendental platform. Therefore, yesterday also we were discussing in one of the purports, Srila Prabhupada gives the translation of Mamchu Abhicharena Bhakti Yogena Sevate Sagunan Samadityetan Brahmbhuyaya Kalpate. But Srila Prabhupada translates Avyabhicharini as what? Somebody remembers? Yes, sincerely and seriously. Prabhupada, that's how Prabhupada translates Avyabhicharini Bhakti. And so, the sincerity and seriousness to follow what the Shastra is saying, what Guru is saying, what sadhus are saying. So if that seriousness is there and the sincerity is there, then that's how one can gradually come out of the influence of the modes and gradually come to the transcendental platform. Is that okay? Somebody would like to add something to this?
In Bhagavad Gita 17.2 purpose is the association of the living entity with the different modes of nature has been going on perpetually. Since the living entity is in contact with material nature, he acquires different types of mentality according to his association with the material modes. But this nature can be changed if one associates with a bona fide spiritual master and abides by his rules and the scriptures.
Correct.
Gradually, one can change his position from ignorance to goodness or from passion to goodness.
Yes.
The conclusion is that blind faith in a particular mode of nature cannot help a person become elevated to the perfectional stage. One has to consider things carefully with intelligence in the association of a bona fide spiritual master.
Right. Yes, these points have been continuously stressed in the scriptures. Also, you can read 14.19 purport. That is also very interesting, very important points. Okay, is that okay, Bhadrashma? Thank you. Yes, Shyam Jagannath.
So Dhruva Maharaj, Actually, he is the king, so it was his duty also to, because Yakshas had killed, so to give them punishment also. Obviously, he got unnecessarily angry. That was the, now when Swambhu Manu comes, he explaining them that Yakshas, we should understand there are so many factors. Actually, Yakshas are not the real cause. No. But we see that Yakshas became the instrument of killing. So as a duty, Dhruva Maharaj has to punish him.
Correct.
So now when it comes to this whole philosophy that this person is the cause, there's so many causes. So this is just a philosophy to build our consciousness, and the person has to on the at the right time, he has to do the needful. For example, the father and son are there. When someone is attacking the son, so naturally the father has to protect, and even son may be killed, he will do the needful at that time. So obviously we do understand that the root cause may be, the remote cause may be some, but at the right time one has to do the needful. So this is whole philosophy we discuss that. So it is only to build our consciousness so that we don't go into the extremes. Is my understanding correct?
Yes. In fact, we had that discussion, if you remember, in one of the previous classes. Almost in the, I think so, second class or third class, some class, we had that discussion. We discussed that conversation between the bull and Maharaj Parikshit. And then we also saw some comments by Burijan Prabhu on that. And so then Burijan Prabhu gave some practical understanding of how to deal with the situation. So though on one hand, we know that ultimately I am the cause and I'm simply getting the reaction for that, but still on a practical level, one has to do the needful. So Burijan Prabhu says that just like if somebody is coming to attack me with a stick or whatever, then I have to do the needful. I have to do the needful. But in spite of me doing the needful, now what may happen, we don't know. So then, so somebody is trying to attack me, I may try to flee away, I may try to hide, I may try to do something. But in spite of that, maybe the person actually catches me and beats me up. So then I have to accept that this has happened because this is the will of the Lord. This is happening because of my own past actions. So I have, like Prabhupada gives so many examples, isn't it? Just like the patient. So the person is sick, he has to go to the doctor. But in spite of the best of the treatment, sometimes the patient dies. Sometimes in spite of no treatment, somebody survives. So we have to do the needful, but at the same time, we have to understand that the Lord's plan prevails, and then we have to accept it. So if we don't understand this philosophy, then we get into the blame game. Then we may not only just do the needful, but then we also will maintain grudges, and we will also then blame people, and then we may not be able to forgive them, and we may not be able to see the plan of the Lord in the ultimate issue. So therefore, understanding that philosophy is very necessary. Okay, online, any questions?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Prabhuji.
Just a second, please. It's Narsimha Prabhu has a question, so we'll come back to you in a second. Yes, Narsimha Prabhu, you have a question?
Yes, Prabhuji. I'm just trying to confirm my understanding. Because when the question is raised that, Dhruva Maharaj had the darshan of the Lord and he became pure duty, and still why he has this Atiroshena in killing the Yakshas. So Prabhupada is writing towards the end of this chapter that he had this personal ambition to fight and annihilate the whole race of Yakshas, and his grandfather was trying to remove this last tinge of false ambition. And Prabhupada is also writing about this, although he was liberated, for the time being afflicted by the illusion of Maya. So is this answer correct, or this understanding? Or?
Yes, that's correct. So though, as Prabhupada is writing very clearly, that he got angry in the performance of his duty, he got angry, that was justified. But when he got angry, he got carried away by the anger. And then it became unreasonable.
Okay.
Yes, Mataji had some question.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Prabhuji,
Yes.
regarding this anger that is there, we see that devotees do get angry on themselves if they have not actually done something properly. It's a healthy anger, basically, that they try to even punish themselves in subtly also, that oh, I was not able to, or till the time I don't chant certain number of rounds, I will not drink water, or oh, I have not completed reading this much, so I'll punish myself. Now, one is called healthy anger, but the other anger that the devotees have, there is a unhealthy anger on themselves itself. Like I saw in some part of India, that there was this devotee, and she used to punish herself very brutally, actually, means in terms of beating her own self, and uh, uh, and she was a good devotee. I mean, morning program, everything she used to attend very nicely, but she used to punish herself very brutally, and she used to harm her body and soul. So how can we understand this, Prabhuji?
Therefore, in Krishna consciousness, nothing is to be done whimsically.
Ah.
So everything has to be under proper guidance and proper instruction.
Ah.
So we understand that the body is also property of Krishna, as very much exemplified in the pastime of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Sanatana Goswami. So therefore, we have no right to harm Krishna's property. The body is Krishna's property. So how can we harm unnecessarily?
Yeah, because I used to feel very bad when she used to punish herself, and I said, no, we can never punish ourselves so brutally, actually. Because if we are punishing ourselves, one day it might come to the other person also, when we're in a leadership position, that we might punish them also the same way. So that's the lesson I was trying to understand.
Yes. So therefore, everything has to be under proper guidance.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else?
Kuvera's good. I couldn't fully capture because earlier there was one asura word used for yakshas, and then here further it comes that they are descendants of Kuvera. So, what is the yaksha's position in this whole cosmology?
In the purport to text 33, Prabhupada writes, as such, they have been described as Punya Janan, pious men. They are not ordinary persons. They were not ordinary persons. They are Punya Janan, pious men.
And earlier that demonic word was used. No?
Yes,
So what is their situation?
I mean, we have to see the context of the previous, in what context exactly that was said. So, but in any case, their activity was demoniac in terms of killing Uttamas, so unnecessarily maybe. So from that point of view, maybe it can be said the action was demoniac, but as he's saying here, they are descendants of Kuvera, belong to Kuvera's family, the Punaj.
Verse 28 of previous chapter it was.
20?
28. Chapter 10, text 28.
Chapter 10. Chapter 10, text 20. The demon yakshas are by nature very heinous. That one, no?
Yeah. So by nature very heinous, and then they are Punya Jana also.
Which one? 5. Okay, full of ghostly persons who are followers of Lord Shiva. So in the purport, Prabhupada says the yakshas may be taken to be the Himalayan tribes, like the Tibetans. But he says the yakshas are more or less devotees of Lord Shiva. They're devotees of Lord Shiva, so therefore they're pious, but still they have. You have something to say? But still there are some demoniac. So the followers of Lord Shiva also have some demoniac qualities, all that, isn't it? So combination. So they are Punya Janan also, followers of Lord Shiva, some demoniac qualities, so everything. Chapter 12. Dhruva Maharaj goes back to Godhead. Okay, let's recite the first verse. Maitreya Uvacha Dhruvam nivrittam pratibudhya vaishashad apetamanyum bhagavan dhaneshwaraha tatragatascharanayakshakinarai samstutyamano nyavadat kritanjalim. Translation.
It says Maitreya said, "My dear Budur, Dhruv Maharaja's anger subsided and he completely ceased killing yakshas. When Kuver, the most blessed master of the treasury, learned this news, he appeared before Dhruv. While being worshipped by yakshas, kinnaras, and charanas, he spoke to Dhruv Maharaj, who stood before him with folded hands.
Okay, so by the good instructions of Swayambhu Manu, which Dhruva Maharaj heard, what happened? Apeta manyum. Manyu. Manyu means anger. Apeta. It subsided. So by hearing good instructions, that some transformation should take place by hearing good instructions. So that's what happened to Dhruva Maharaj. The first nine verses speak about Kuvera offering benedictions to Dhruva. Okay, text 2, please read the translation. Dhanadha Uvacha, Kuvera has been called as Dhanadha, the master of the treasure.
The master of the treasury, Kuvera, said, "O sinless son of Kshatriya, I am very glad to know that under the instruction of your grandfather, you have given up your enmity. Although it is very difficult to avoid, I am very pleased with you."
Next.
Actually, you have not killed the Yakshas, nor have they killed your brother, for the ultimate cause of generation and annihilation is the eternal time feature of the Supreme Lord.
Okay, so this is almost similar philosophy which Swayambhu Manu tells. He's sort of repeating the same thing. So we'll just go through this rapidly. Next. Fourth.
Misidentification of oneself and others as I and you on the basis of the bodily concept of life is a product of ignorance. This bodily concept is the cause of repeated birth and death, and it makes us go on continuously in the material existence.
Next.
My dear Dhruva, come forward. May the Lord always grace you with good fortune. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is beyond our sensory perception, is the super soul of all living entities, and thus all entities are one without distinction. Begin therefore to render service unto the transcendental form of the Lord, who is the ultimate shelter of all living entities.
Okay, so they're giving the same advice to engage in devotional service. Take 6.
Engage yourself fully, therefore, in the devotional service of the Lord, for only He can deliver us from this entanglement of materialistic existence. Although the Lord is attached to His material potency, He is aloof from her activities. Everything in this material world is happening by the inconceivable potency of the Supreme Personality of Godhead.
Okay, so basically the same philosophy, what Swayambhu Manu said, that how the Lord is performing all this through His inconceivable potencies. Yes. Take 7.
Maharaj, son of Maharaj Uttanapad, we have heard that you are constantly engaged in transcendental loving service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is known for his lotus navel. You are therefore worthy to take all benedictions from us. Please therefore ask without hesitation whatever benediction you want from me.
Okay, so he's saying ask for whatever benediction you want because he's very pleased. So he's asking, you can ask for any benediction. Prabhupada writes one point in the purport: to be a devotee is therefore an exalted position. Why it is exalted? Because simply by rendering transcendental loving service unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one can have all the benedictions of the world without separate endeavor. Okay, so devotee can get whatever he wants, unless the Lord sanctions, of course. So therefore, further on, Prabhupada writes, in other words, he knew that for Dhruva Maharaj, there was nothing desirable within the three material worlds. He knew that Dhruva would ask for nothing but to remember the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord constantly. So he knew that. So he's saying, okay, ask for benediction, but he knew he won't take any material benediction. So, because he was already totally purified at that point of time. Go ahead, text 8. I think so. See, the mic is coming this side, it's not going that side. Give to Ranchor Prabhu.
The great sage Maitreya continued, "My dear Vidra, when thus asked to accept the benediction from Kuvera, the Yaksharaj, king of the Yakshas, Dhruv Maharaj, that most elevated pure devotee, who was an intelligent and thoughtful king, begged that he might have unflinching faith in and remembrance of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. For thus a person can cross over the ocean of nescience very easily, although it is very difficult for others to cross."
Okay, let's recite this verse. Maitreya Uvacha Sarajarajena Varaya Chodito Dhruvo Mahabhagavato Mahamati Harau Savavre Chalitam Smritim Yaya Taratyayatnena Duratyayam Tamaha. Okay, so he's saying, so the qualities of Dhruva Maharaj are being mentioned here. What are the qualities? Mahabhagavato Mahamati. There's a Mahabhagavat, and he also has Mahamati, great intelligence. So those were the qualities of Dhruva Maharaj. And so because he was intelligent, he was Mahabhagavat, and Prabhupada translates Mahamati in the translation as intelligent and thoughtful. Okay, so not only just intelligent, he was also thoughtful. So thoughtful, proper discrimination. And so what did he ask for? He asked for Harau Savavre Achalitam Smritim. He asked for Achalitam Smritim, Achal, unflinching remembrance of the Supreme Lord. Prabhupada adds one more thing to that. He says unflinching faith, faith and remembrance. Because without faith, very difficult to have remembrance. So Prabhupada is adding that, though it is not in the verse. Achalitam smritim. Then, ayatnena duratyayam tamaha. So in the morning, Shankar Pandit was discussing something which is dushkaram, sukaram. So what is dushkaram? Duratyayam tamaha. To cross over the ocean of nations is dushkaram or duratyayam, very difficult. But it can become ayatnena, without difficulty. Very easy it can become by this achalitam smritim. Then tarati ayatnena. Then it is possible to cross very easily if one has that constant remembrance of the Lord. So Prabhupada writes, but Dhruva Maharaj wanted a benediction which surpasses even the highest Purushartha liberation. He wanted the benediction that he might constantly remember the lotus feet of the Lord. This stage of life is called the Panchama Purushartha. When a devotee comes to the platform of Panchama Purushartha, simply engaging in devotional service to the Lord, the fourth Purushartha liberation becomes very insignificant in his eyes. In fact, this whole thing was the discussion today morning, isn't it? This Prabodhananda Saraswati, same thing. Devotee considers sense gratification, will of the wisp. And further down he says, naturally, anyone who's a first-class devotee must be first-class intelligent person and therefore not interested in any kind of benediction within this material world. Towards the end, the King of Kings personally offered Dhruva Maharaj any amount of riches, but he declined to accept them. He is described therefore as Mahamati, very thoughtful or highly intellectual. Okay, please read the translation of the next verse.
The son of Idavida, Lord Kuvera, was very pleased, and happily he gave Dhruva Maharaj the benediction he wanted. Thereafter, he disappeared from Dhruva's presence, and Dhruva Maharaj returned to his capital city.
Okay, so Prabhupada raises a question. Why did Dhruva Maharaj take a benediction from a demigod? The answer is that for a Vaishnav, there is no objection to taking a benediction from a demigod if it is favorable for advancing in Krishna consciousness. Further down, Dhruva Maharaj did not ask Kuvera for transference to the spiritual world, which is called liberation. He simply asked that wherever he would remain, whether in the spiritual or the material worlds, he would always remember the Supreme Personality of Godhead. A Vaishnava is always respectful to everyone. So when Kuvera offered him a benediction, he did not refuse it, but he wanted something which would be favorable to his advancement in Krishna consciousness. But Srila Prabhupada, in so many I mean, practically millions of times, Prabhupada writes that a devotee, he should desire to go back home, back to Godhead, isn't it? Back to Godhead magazine. Sometimes, but here Prabhupada is writing, Dhruva Maharaj didn't even want to go back to the spiritual world. So what should we do? We should desire to go back to Godhead or no? Without mic, no, please don't speak without mic, otherwise the online viewers will get angry.
Yes, Dhruva Maharaj been in this world also, he was able to maintain Krishna conscious and saw the Lord. So that's why like Prabhupada, maybe the purport is written like this, but as a practicing devotee, like we should aim the high only, like going back to Godhead. Because the consciousness is not yet pure. So
Okay, so if you say the consciousness is not yet, what did you say? Consciousness is not yet
pure.
Okay.
So when we are aiming for the high, we will try to practice sincerely.
So when we aim to go back to Godhead, we can try to practice sincerely. Okay. Somebody would like to add to that? Should we desire to go back to Godhead or no? So if you say no, then that means Prabhupada said something wrong.
We should desire to go back to Godhead because that will help us to intensify our Krishna consciousness. At the same time, if Lord wants us to remain for the sake of preaching, then devotee is ready to do that also.
Okay, interesting comments. Can we have some participation from those who have not yet participated, please? Don't worry, there are no marks for whatever you say here.
Hare Krishna.
Yes.
Prabhuji, online, Shyam Leela Das speaking.
Yes, no, please go ahead.
So, actually, a pure devotee, he is not afraid of any situation. Narayana para sarve, nakutasya na pipyati. So whether it is Swarg or Naraka, he is ready to be there wherever the Lord is sending him. But from our point of view, we should actually desire to go back home, back to Godhead. Means that is actually the topmost goal for us. And maybe when one comes to that stage of pure, complete pure devotion, one may then think that, oh, I don't, I will take whatever the Lord is giving me. I will take whatever the service the Lord is giving me.
Okay, good point. Good point. Anybody else? I think that's quite clear. So, bolo.
Desire to go back to God is very natural for the soul. Because that's like the birthright of the soul to be with the Lord, in the Lord's abode in his pastimes and all that. But at the same time, like a devotee, he goes on in his attitude to please the Lord and serve the Lord. That if at all Lord wants him to be in certain situation, but then he wants that remembrance of the Lord should not be taken away, that his service should continue.
Right. Yes, that's correct. There's one purport where Srila Prabhupada writes, I'm not remembering the exact reference, but Srila Prabhupada writes that basically going back to Godhead means being fully Krishna conscious. So then the place is immaterial. So if one is fully Krishna conscious, then one is totally dependent on the Lord. And if Krishna wants to take the person, the devotee, back to the spiritual world, okay, that is fine. But even while remaining in the material world, he's actually in the spiritual world. Because so much depends on the consciousness. So, and that is actually, morning also, there was a discussion on Vishwam Purna Sukhaite. So Srila Prabhupada explains why is it Vishwam Purna Sukhaite for the devotee, the material world also is Vishwam Purna Sukhaite, because he's able to see the Lord everywhere. And so because he's able to see the Lord everywhere, he's happy even while being in the material worlds. And so therefore, it is as good as the spiritual world. Also, we read some purports where Srila Prabhupada has written that for the devotee, what the devotee is doing in the material world, the same thing is going to do in the spiritual world also. Activity is the same, devotional service. So therefore, at the same time, if a devotee actually desires to go back to Vaikuntha, that is the spiritual world in terms of the geographical place also, that is also correct. Srila Prabhupada does mention that also, because it is natural for a son to be reunited with the father. So that is also correct. And to think that the main aspect of going back to Godhead is to be in full Krishna consciousness wherever one is. So that is also correct. So in both aspects, so a devotee, he may desire to actually go back to the spiritual world or to be in the spiritual consciousness or the Vaikuntha consciousness while being in the material worlds. So both are totally perfect. Yes, Alakshmi.
Hare Krishna. In this material world, even though we may want to perform devotional service full of our capacity, but here it is not possible because here the material body itself is not conducive for spiritual devotional service. So devotee may want to do service. So this place is not a perfect place for performing devotional service perfectly.
Correct. Yes, that understanding is correct. So therefore, Srila Prabhupada did say that, yes, we must desire to get out of the material world. And Srila Prabhupada writes in the purport to the 13th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, verses 8 to 12, Janma Mrityu Janavyadi Dukkha Doshanu Darshanam. So in that purport, Srila Prabhupada says, yes. So therefore, the understanding of the nature of the material worlds gives an impetus. It gives an impetus to go to the spiritual world. So yes, it is fine. It's correct. It's correct that yes, we understand that the material world is so much full of problems, difficulties, which serve as impediments in our practice of devotional service also. But at the same time, if a devotee is fully Krishna conscious, then he doesn't see impediments as impediments. He sees that also as the mercy of the Lord. So therefore, even in that situation in the material world, the devotee is always remembering Krishna and therefore he is blissful. So both the understandings are correct. There's nothing wrong. At the same time, a devotee desiring to go back to the spiritual world is also not wrong, because that is his natural position. At the same time, the devotee is happy in the material world also because he's always thinking of Krishna. So either way, nothing wrong. As long as one is Krishna conscious, everything is perfect. Okay, fine. Anyone has some refutations on their understanding?
The Prabhu is saying that we cannot distribute books in spiritual world.
Yes, correct. That is why Srila Prabhupada gave the name Bhavananda. You know that pastime, no? Bhavananda. So Prabhupada said, what is this Bhavananda? There's no Ananda in Bhava, in the material world. So what is the Ananda? The only Ananda is preaching. That is the only Ananda in the material. In the spiritual world, no preaching, no book distribution. So yes, one can remain here and eternally distribute books also, no problem. Yes, Deshant Prabhu, you want to go to spiritual world or you want to remain? Give the mic, pass.
वो धाम जाने की इच्छा तो सबकी है और प्रचार करने की इच्छा भी सबकी है, और हम बोलते हैं कि अगर यहाँ रहेंगे और हम कृष्ण का स्मरण करेंगे तो यही भगवत धाम है। लेकिन 24 घंटा स्मरण नहीं होता है। ये हमारे ये शरीर की कमजोरी है, मन की कमजोरी है। इसीलिए हमें ज़्यादा से ज़्यादा जो आचार्य है उन्होंने जिस पथ पे बताया वो पथ पालन करके भगवत धाम जाने की इच्छा करनी चाहिए।
सही बात।
क्योंकि हम प्रचार की इच्छा करेंगे तो इस भौतिक जगत में हम जो प्रचार करते हैं तो उसके पीछे एक प्रलोभन होता है। मैं सेंटर बनाऊंगा, मैं लोग बनाऊंगा, लोग मुझे ऐसा बोलेंगे, ऐसा करेंगे, इधर घुमाएंगे, मेरा प्रवचन सुनेंगे, मेरा फेसबुक होगा, मेरा व्हाट्सएप होगा। तो ये मटेरियल डिजाइन इसमें बहुत समा जाती है इस प्रचार में, इस कलयुग के अभी के प्रचार में। तो इसीलिए ये इसमें वो भले ही हम प्रभुपाद के लिए कर रहे हैं लेकिन उसमें हमारी भी इच्छाएं प्रबल होती जाती है और हमें समझ में नहीं आता। तो इसीलिए ज्यादा से ज्यादा हमें इच्छा करनी चाहिए कि हम प्रभुपाद ने जो सिखाया उसको पकड़ के भगवत धाम जाने की इच्छा करें।
Good. Thank you.
I heard Bhakti Vidya Purna Swami Maharaj. He says you can go to spiritual world and if Krishna wants, you can come as Acharya.
Good. Thank you. Hare Krishna. Okay, so we'll go to the next section from 10 to 16. Dhruva Maharaj's glorious rule and retirements. Verse 10, please read the translation.
As long as he remained at home, Dhruva Maharaj performed many great ceremonial sacrifices in order to please the enjoyer of all sacrifices, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Prescribed ceremonial sacrifices are especially meant to please Lord Vishnu, who is the objective of all such sacrifices and who awards the resultant benedictions.
Yes, so as long as Dhruva Maharaj remained at home in his kingdom, so he was performing many sacrifices. Prabhupada writes, why was he performing so many sacrifices? In the third paragraph of the purport, Dhruva Maharaj is an ideal king, practically emptied his treasury by giving charity. So he performed sacrifices, gave charity. And then he says, world monarchy has failed ever since kings began to satisfy their personal senses with the taxes accumulated from the citizens. So basically, Dhruva Maharaj performed all these sacrifices simply to set an example for the citizens. So though he was already a pure devotee, he did not have to perform. Okay, Prabhupada writes it in the last paragraph of the purport. But anyways, before that, we'll read a few sentences. And then he talks about, so the best sacrifice in this age is the Sankirtan Yajna. Any householder, regardless of his position, can perform the Sankirtan Yajna without expenditure. All the family members can sit down together, simply clap their hands and chant Hare Krishna Mahamantra. Okay, so no need of even Kartal Mridan. So even that much expenditure is not needed. One can simply clap hands and chant Hare Krishna. And then what? And then distribute prasad to the people in general. This is quite sufficient for this age of Kali. The Krishna consciousness movement is based on this principle. Chant the Hare Krishna mantra at every moment, as much as possible, both inside and outside the temples. And as far as possible, distribute prasad. Okay, Prabhupada's mission statement for the Krishna consciousness mission. Okay, so chant and distribute prasad. This process can be accelerated with the cooperation of state administrators and those who are producing the country's wealth. Simply by liberal distribution of prasad and sankirtan, the whole world can become peaceful and prosperous. Okay, now somebody read the last paragraph of the purport.
Although Dhruva Maharaj was a great devotee and had nothing to do with these sacrifices, to set an example to his people, he performed many sacrifices and gave all his wealth in charity. For as long as he lived as a householder, he never spent a farthing for his sense gratification. In this verse, the word karmaphala pradam is very significant. The Lord awards everyone different kinds of karma as the individual living entities desire. He is the super soul present within the heart of everyone. And he is so kind and liberal that he gives everyone full facilities to perform whatever acts one wants. Then the result of the action is also enjoyed by the living entity. If anyone wants to enjoy or lord it over material nature, the Lord gives him full facilities, but he becomes entangled in the resultant reactions. Similarly,
If anyone wants to engage himself fully in devotional service, the Lord gives him full facilities and the devotee enjoys the results. The Lord is therefore known as Karma Phala Prada.
Okay, so the Lord is karma phala prada. He gives the karma phal based upon the desire of the living entity. Ye yatha mam prapadyante. So whatever the living entity desires, then the Lord allows him to do that. He gives him facilities to do that. But then the living entity has to suffer or enjoy the consequences. So in this, but another important point is, so Dhruva Maharaj, he was performing all these sacrifices and everything for setting an example for the people. So he himself was a great devotee. He had nothing to do with all these sacrifices, but to set an example that how people in general need to perform sacrifice. Everyone may not be a pure devotee. So therefore, then they need to perform their respective duties of yajna, dana, tapa. So for that purpose, he performed all these sacrifices. Text 11 translation.
Dhruva Maharaj rendered devotional service unto the Supreme, the reservoir of everything, with unrelenting force. While carrying out his devotional service to the Lord, he could see that everything is situated in him only, and that he is situated in all living entities. The Lord is called Achyuta because he never fails in his prime duty to give protection to his devotees.
Okay, so as Prabhupada writes, although Dhruva Maharaj performed many sacrifices in order to be an exemplary king, he was constantly engaged in devotional service. The Lord always protects his surrendered devotee. Ordinary persons cannot understand how the Supreme Lord is situated in everyone's heart, but devotee can actually see him. So that's the vision of the Mahabhagavat. He sees the Lord everywhere. So that was the position of Dhruva Maharaj. By his practice of devotional service, of course, he was already a Mahabhagavat, but then he had that full realization that Krishna is everywhere. Premanjana Churita Bhakti Vilochanena. Okay, text 12.
Dhruva Maharaj.
Okay, let's recite this verse, please. Tamevam Shila Sampannam Brahmanyam Dina Vatsalam Goptaram Brahma Setuna Menire Pitaram Prajaha.
Dhruva Maharaj was endowed with all godly qualities. He was very respectful to the devotees of the Supreme Lord and very kind to the poor and innocent. And he protected the religious principles. With all these good qualities, he was considered to be the direct father of all the citizens.
Please read the first paragraph.
The personal qualities of Dhruva Maharaj described herein are the exemplary qualities of a saintly king. Not only a king, but also the leaders of the modern democratic or impersonal government must be qualified with all these godly characteristics. Then the citizens of the state can be happy. It is clearly stated here that the citizens thought of Dhruva Maharaj as their father. As a child, depending on the able father, is completely satisfied. So the citizens of the state, being protected by the state or the king, should remain satisfied in every respect. At the present moment, however, there is no guarantee by the government of even the primary necessities of life in the state, namely the protection of the living, lives and property of the citizens.
Yes. So here, Dhruva Maharaj, Shila Sampannam, he had all good qualities. And here Srila Prabhupada is mentioning of how a leader, it is very important for a leader to have exemplary qualities. There's a very nice purport in the 17th chapter of the first canto. Verse number, I'm not exactly remembering what's the verse number, something around 40, something like that. Srila Prabhupada writes that how, if somebody can do a quick Veda-based search. So the Srila Prabhupada writes about the leaders of society. Leaders of society are the Brahmanas, the king, the spiritual master. So all these are the parents, all these are the leaders of society. And Srila Prabhupada says such leaders must be crucially tested for their character. Those are the words Prabhupada is using, crucially tested for their character. So, and then Prabhupada goes on to say in the same purport, they may have less educational qualification, but what is very important is having character. Huh? 1:41. Okay, my guess was not so bad. So 1:17:41, Prabhupada writes. So you can read the exact statement. Please give the mic to Antudip.
The four leaders of the human society, namely the sannyasi, the brahmana, the king, and the public leader, must be tested crucially by their character and qualification. Before one can be accepted as a spiritual or material master of society, he must be tested by the above mentioned criteria of character. Such public leaders may be less qualified in academic qualifications, but it is necessary primarily that they be free from the contamination of the four disqualifications, namely gambling, drinking, prostitution, and animal slaughter.
Okay, so we already had a discussion yesterday on the importance of character and dharma stapane hetu, sadhura vyavahar. So we had a discussion on that yesterday. So, but an important point here is that first thing is, yes, a leader must have character because that's what others will follow and that's what others will imbibe. And another important point in this connection, this we can see in later on in the instructions of the Lord to Prithu Maharaj. So the Lord tells Prithu Maharaj that if he properly follows the scriptural injunctions, Guru, Sadhu, Shastra, then it will be possible for all the citizens to be satisfied. So when the leader himself properly follows Guru, Sadhu, Shastra, that is how the subordinates can be happy because Krishna is happy. So when Krishna is happy, watering the root of the tree, then everyone becomes satisfied. And so therefore, for the leader to first of all, properly understand the instructions of Guru, Sadhu, Shastra is very important. Because if the leader himself does not know what are the instructions of Guru, Sadhu, Shastra, what is he going to follow? Therefore, for us, and of course, here practically everyone is a leader here. So very important to very carefully, scrutinizingly read Srila Prabhupada's books and Srila Prabhupada's instructions. Otherwise, we will not know how to please the Acharya and the Supreme Lord. And when we don't know that, then very difficult to please them. And without pleasing them, it is not possible to please the subordinates either. So this is the crucial point, how to satisfy the citizens, how to satisfy the subordinates. So one oneself must be properly acquainted with the instructions of Guru, Sadhu, Shastra and follow that very sincerely and seriously. And that is exactly what is being said over here. So when the leaders, they are qualified with all godly characteristics, then the citizens of the state can be happy. Okay, so that is the connection. How subordinates can be happy when the leader properly follows Guru, Sadhu, Shastra, because then Krishna is pleased by that. And then in the next paragraph, Prabhupada is described as Brahmanyam. Dhruva Maharaj was very devoted to the Brahmanas who engage in the study of the Vedas and thereby know the Supreme Personality of God. They're always busy propagating Krishna consciousness. And then Dina Vatsalam, the state head should be very kind to the innocent. And he talks about animals and all. But that is not the situation in modern Kali Yuga. That was Sati Yoga. So therefore, at the end, Prabhupada says, considering all these points, the people today have no alternative but to take to Krishna consciousness for protection of religion, life, and property. Text 13.
Dhruva Maharaj ruled over this planet for 36,000 years. He diminished the reactions of pious activities by enjoyment, and by practicing austerities, he diminished inauspicious reactions.
So what do you think? Dhruva Maharaj had pious reactions, sinful reactions. He had all this. He's a pure devotee, correct? Then he still has all this pious reaction, sinful reaction. Then what's the meaning of this? Any thoughts? Okay, under the truth.
A leader gets 1/6 of the karma of the entire praja. So if he's doing devotion service properly, then he remains above the.
Okay, that's applicable to a common leader. But in the case of Dhruva Maharaj, how does it apply?
No, even the devotee leader has to bear the situation of being a leader. So
But he's already liberated platform at Darshan of Supreme Lord. So where is the question of Papa Punya? Papa Punya is only for one in the material realm, correct? Papa Punya doesn't exist for a liberated platform. And that is the same thing. But that is the common injunction for any ordinary king, any ordinary leader. But
Even we say the spiritual master suffers the reaction for a subordinate's misconduct. So it is not like, so there is a reaction, even if he's a liberated person, there is a reaction for bearing the responsibility of a subordinate. So for a pure devotee, it's also mentioned that he has to bear the reaction because he is taking care of that person. Similarly, the leader, if he is a king, he's a liberated devotee, that is his conduct is good. But because the subordinate goes wrong, then he has to bear the reaction. So thus he has to fulfill the responsibility of training.
But then because he's on the liberated platform, Krishna will take care of that. No, Tvam sarva papebhyo.
Krishna.
Okay, any case, without getting into too much discussion. So Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says, so he's desiring to become free from pious activities, sinful reactions. This is simply out of humility. So it is not a case that he actually has any papa punya, but simply out of humility, he's thinking himself like an ordinary person. And therefore he is desiring to be free from all these papa and punya. But actually, as of Dhruva Maharaj, he had no such reactions as he's on the platform of prema. That's how Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur explains this. Okay, fine. Please read the translation to 14.
The self-controlled great soul, Dhruva Maharaj, thus passed many years favorably, executing three kinds of worldly activities, namely religiosity, economic development, and satisfaction of all material desires. Thereafter, he handed over the charge of the royal throne to his son.
Yes, so he did all this, all his duties he did, and then he handed over the throne to his son. So Prabhupada comments on the word avichalendriya. Avichalendriya. So his senses were not disturbed. And although he was a very old man, but his senses were still young, and yet he was not interested in sense gratification. That's why it's called avichalendriya. He was always self-controlled. I was talking about Raghunath Das Goswami. Okay, fine. 15.
Srila Dhruva Maharaj realized that this cosmic manifestation bewilders living entities like a dream or phantasmagoria because it is a creation of the illusory external energy of the Supreme Lord.
And one more.
Thus, Dhruva Maharaj at the end left his kingdom, which extended all over the earth and was bounded by the great oceans. He considered his body, his wives, his children, his friends, his army, his rich treasury, his very comfortable palaces, and his many enjoyable pleasure grounds to be the creation of the illusory energy. Thus, in due course of time, he retired to the forest in the Himalayas known as Badrika Ashram.
Okay, so in this way, Dhruva Maharaj perfectly understood that all these things in the material world are illusory. And so he left his kingdom, which he ruled for 36,000 years, and went to Badrika Ashram. Okay, fine. So we will continue the rest of the chapter tomorrow. That will be the last class on this unit. Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Granthra Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Samved Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Hare Krishna.